So, okay, for the second one here,
Yeah.
last week we saw the new retail sales numbers up 0.7% on the month. This was well above expectations of the 0.3% and annualizes to about a 8.7% increase in retail sales. That's not double digit, but, in shooting range of double digit sales, retail sales. So, with everyone complaining about inflation, complaining about employment, with all the worries in the world, the US consumer certainly doesn't mind spending. Maybe it's stress spending, maybe they're spending their feelings or something like that. But I'd love to hear your take on what's going on here with the consumer and retail sales.
So I think it's a combination of things. You're right about people's feelings, and we're going to address that in a minute. But I think the first point you made, Enrique, is the key one. So retail sales were up, as you said, 0.7% for the month, but the CPI, the Consumer Price Index, which people regularly refer to as the inflation index, that was up 0.4% from the prior month. So you could say, wait a minute, that's more than half from inflation. But, as we've been saying at Deep Knowledge Investing for years, and as Andrew Brown, our intern, just pointed out, inflation is hugely understated. My favorite example, first of all, the housing prices in the CPI are ridiculous. They're calculated based off of what we are, owner's equivalent rent, rather than actual housing expenses. They're trying to tell us that food prices are up 2%. Enrique, I can't imagine you believe that. I don't know anyone who does. And so if the CPI is understated, then it's really easy to conclude that most of the increase in retail sales was actually due to inflation and not necessarily people buying more stuff. It's people paying more for the same amount of stuff. The other thing I'd add is the key point you were talking about, which is people's feelings. And in general, I think it's unwise to live beyond your means. I think it's a really good idea to have a budget and, not spend more than you're able to. With that said, it's really easy to understand why consumers keep spending. The government exercises no spending restraints. The government refuses to acknowledge there are trade-offs between program benefits and costs. We've seen bank bailouts. There are widely disseminated rumors about the government preparing for commercial real estate bailouts on the way. People looking at that have basically been shown there are no trade-offs for spending. The government will bail out everybody. They're bailing out student loan, people who took out student loans. And so people are looking at it saying, wait a minute, why am I the sucker here? Why should I be living within my means when other people are taking on huge amounts of debt, huge amounts of risk? If it works, they get to keep it. If it doesn't, the government bails them out. The government has created a situation where people feel like suckers for exercising any kind of fiscal sanity or restraint. I think it's a bad idea, but I can understand why people feel that way. If you're listening to this, I strongly suggest living within your means. But for those of you who haven't, I completely understand why you might be frustrated or feel like the system's rigged against you. Enrique, what are your thoughts? How do you feel about this?
Well, look, I don't disagree with anything you said, but I'll take the other bright side of the coin. People have jobs, people have income, and the economy's growing. And, so like I agree with everything you're saying, but I think that, the growth in consumer and retail spending is certainly getting a contribution from inflation, but it's also in a high employment economy, people are gonna spend the money, just to be frank. So I think that, I look at that number, there's a lot of things, and we'll talk about this in a little bit. I look back to the 94-95 period, which is when I first entered into the markets, and, a period of stability after, and this is stable after a period of extreme instability, which was certainly the COVID and then the hyperinflation period. People are relaxed a little bit. So, I think everything you said is true, but on the positive side, high employment, even if it might be getting a little bit less, People are there to spend. And don't forget, a stock market that's up 35-40% in the last 9, 12, 15 months is also another reason. So I think it's a combination of both positives and negatives.
Yeah, and you're right. It's worth pointing out that those consumer spending numbers are aggregate. It's not a median spending number. So people who do have investments, who do have money in the markets, have been pretty flush lately. And you're right. The employment numbers have been good. They've been faked, but people who want to work can be right now. They've gotten raises. And I know a lot of people have been highlighting increases in consumer credit, but the offset to that is that they're also making more money and there's been inflation. And when you look at consumer credit versus people's income, the credit usage is up, but the ratio isn't actually bad. It's not outside of historical norms.
Yeah. Well, good. So that'll bring us to the next one.